Hello, Internet! Gino, that Pinguino Grieco, here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and it is time to go back into the Final Fantasy dungeon, where I am joined, as always, by Chris ZombiePie Redacted. That sound is a little bit more of his soul escaping as the Final Fantasy seeps in.
Every time I record a podcast and play a game, a part of my life force is permanently removed from my being.
Yeah, it's like, think about how when you fill, you know, if you wanted to fill a jelly donut with something other than jelly, you'd have to take the jelly out to put new stuff in. Your soul is what's coming out, and the Final Fantasy knowledge is filling it, and you will be suddenly a Final Fantasy-filled donut.
I don't want to be a donut, nor do I want to be a Final Fantasy donut.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I be a cruller?
I'll take crawler?
Crawler.
I don't think it's a cruller.
Wait, really?
No, it's definitely not a cruller.
What?
Yeah, it's a
I've
crawler.
been calling them wrong my entire life.
You probably. I'm sorry.
It must be like French.
David
Cronuts.
Coulier.
Cronuts are good. I could go for a cronut right now.
We're joined also by a special guest who has decided to join us on this almost auspicious of Final Fantasies. And we're joined by Jeff Rud. Hello.
Hi, I'm Jeff Rud.
Jeff Rud? It's not Jeff Rud?
It's there's an ongoing dispute within my family. I defer to the oldest person I know who went by the name in my family, and it was my great-grandmother. She pronounced it Rude, so that's my name. 4 out of 5 members of my immediate family dispute this, but
that's unfortunate. Well, hopefully you don't get too saucy on this podcast, Mr. Rude.
I live in the sauce.
Joined by So Jeff, what would people know you from on the internet?
So for the last 2 years, I've been kind of involved with hardcoregaming101.net. I've been their editor for their podcast, the Top 47,858 Games of All Time show. It's up on iTunes. I've kind of seeded the editor seat on that show, but it's been a lot of fun. I worked on that. I've been working on a kind of a long-term chrono gaming-ish project on the Giant Bomb blogs called Nam Compendium, trying to write about the history of Namco. I was thinking of calling it Nam Collection first, but it turns out that's actually the title of a game that was released in Japan. It's an anthology of 5 games.
That's a really good name.
It's really good.
The last episode was about the console ports of Pac-Man, if I seem to recall correctly. It's quite good.
The first, let's say the ports from 1980, the original version, through 1983, which covers about 40% of the material, because I haven't even started on the Famicom NES stuff. There's 4 versions on the Famicom and Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a nightmare. So I look forward to that.
You would agree that the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man is the definitive version of Pac-Man. It's the definitive Pac-Man experience for everyone to play and enjoy.
Learning about the backstory about some of these things and like uncovering the actual names has kind of been the real fun part of that. And it's I've been using it as an excuse to enrich the Giant Bomb wiki a little bit. I've added, I don't know, as Giant Bomb would describe it, about 4,500 points of wiki entries over the last couple months. So, yeah, I will continue to be working on that as time goes on. So,
very nice. And you're also the progenitor of the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run.
Yeah,
pretty much.
I spawned that in a forum post that amounted to basically everyone in here keeps demanding more endurance runs from these poor bastards. What if we just did it ourselves and raised money for various charities while we did it? And Gino has kind of been, I guess it was maybe about 4 years ago, you took the reins from me generously. Took the reins, I kind of handed them to you in desperation. And yeah, it's been really nice to see that show continue to grow. I think I may be coming back this year and doing something. So
you are partially to blame for this Sisyphean torment that I am in. Because if there's no Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run, I don't talk to Gino about how I've never played a Final Fantasy game. And if I don't talk to Gino about never playing a Final Fantasy game, I don't end up spending a year of my life playing Final Fantasy VIII. But if I don't play Final Fantasy VIII, then I don't get tapped to play 7, 9, 10, 10-2, and this.
And now, this. Final Fantasy, Origins.
So this is your fault. I have someone to blame. I
will say, if I'm to blame for this, I will say thank you to myself, because honestly, I've really enjoyed the blog pieces that you put together over the last couple of years. You're obviously, there's a lot of torment and strife going on in there, but they're incredibly well written. They've just been a real joy, and I think they enrich the site quite a bit. So thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for dealing with Final Fantasy IX, which I don't find to be as good as some people in this chat. Let's say 33% of it.
Weird. I guess he got knocked off the call.
Oh,
that's weird. Oh, weird.
I will say, on Final Fantasy IX, me and my girlfriend started playing that maybe about a month and a half ago, and if the combat moved faster at the outset of that game, we'd have probably played it. But it is so glacial.
Is that the first time you've ever played it? Have you never?
No. I've actually owned Final Fantasy IX for a dozen years, probably. The PS4 version seems like it'd be a good version to play if you wanted to play that, because you can literally just hit a fast forward button.
Yes.
So
what I was going to say is, if you've never seen the ending, or if you wanted to play it, the PS4 or PC versions do have a fast forward feature, and that cleans up I agree with you on the speed of the combat system. There's no reason it needs to be so slow.
Yeah, but it immediately put us off. So
that doesn't stop the first quarter to a half of the game being really boring and uninteresting with a bunch of stock characters that go nowhere.
They don't go nowhere.
They go nowhere for 10, 12 hours.
Well,
it's a 40-hour game, so...
Debating the merits of Final Fantasy IX's plot seems kind of... Not really worth doing, considering we're about to talk about Final Fantasy I's plot,
wait, real quick. Just for the record, Jeff Rud.
Yes.
How about you? I think the audience that listens to our podcast is very familiar where I and Gino stand. What is your relationship with the Final Fantasy franchise in general?
So, the first RPG I ever played was Paper Mario, and I didn't know it was a JRPG. I was kind of introduced to Final Fantasy via some friends when I lived in Hawaii who turned me on to 6/3. Via Super Nintendo emulation, which was also a new concept to me at the time. This would have been about 2003. So Final Fantasy VI, I played that in various spurts for like a dozen years or more, which led to me buying Final Fantasy Dawn of Souls and beating Final Fantasy I in that form many moons ago. And it was right at the period where PS1 stuff was basically out of print, but it was dirt cheap still, so... Quickly grabbed up 7, 8, 9, and Tactics. Got 10 used at some point. So at this point, I have touched, I think, every entry in the series. Finished maybe 3 or 4 of them, and that's kind of something I plan to work on this year, is sit with long JRPGs. I'm kind of a homer for 10. 6
yeah, you are.
Yeah, 10's pretty good. We finally finished that off last year. Yeah, it's a really good game. 6 is probably my favorite in a walk still. I think Tactics may be better than all these games silently. And full disclosure, I've got nice things to say about Final Fantasy 1. But
good. That's good.
We'll get there.
We will get there. And so the show we'll be talking about Final Fantasy 1 for as long as until we finish it, basically. Today will just be the beginning of the game, kind of up until the the start of the main quest, I should say. It's something like that.
Sure.
Once you get access to the larger world.
But Gino...
But before that, Monster sent me a message and said, hey, Final Fantasy X-2 isn't done yet. There's the last mission. Why aren't you playing the last mission? And I said, because I enjoy my life and the sun and nice things. And... this monster kept saying, Gino, play the last mission. Do it. And then this monster joined this call
on Steam at least once a day. Like 5 days in a row.
Yep. And
so
you did.
For those of us playing the home game, what is the last mission?
What the last mission is a ZP, why don't you describe it?
I don't want to, because it's taken enough of my life force, and I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time.
Then why the fuck did you tell me to waste my time?
I don't think we need to talk about it. I think it's okay. So the last mission is a kind of semi-expansion pack micro DLC before DLC was commonplace. Piece of content that was originally for the Japanese-only international release of 10.10.2.
Okay.
In fact, reading the message boards when I was trying to find a guide for this game, someone had mentioned that if you played the original international version in Japan, it would actually carry your saves from 10.2 to the last mission, which would make some of those initial dungeons way easier.
Really?
Yeah, probably. So what we went through...
What would it take? So the last mission is actually a rogue game.
You keep saying rogue game, but it's actually a mystery dungeon game, which I feel is a distinct bastardization of the best attributes of roguelikes and rogues.
Yeah.
For those that don't know what a mystery dungeon is a dungeon with multiple levels is presented before you, and everything inside the dungeon is procedurally generated.
Yeah, they're sort of an offshoot of the She-Ra and the Wanderer series, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and the reason why I call it a bastardization is it manages to take the basic idea of roguelikes and make them absolutely horrid. Mystery dungeon games are notoriously difficult because they take no prisoners, and if you die, you are usually teleported to the front of the dungeon with jack shit to show for it. And that is very much the case with Final Fantasy X-2 The Last Mission. When you boot this up, it is right below Final Fantasy X-2, as if you're continuing the sequence of events. So when you take the HD remaster of 10.10.2, right there on top, Final Fantasy X. Then right below it is that weird 30-minute long cutscene cinematic that explains everything you should know about Final Fantasy X-2 that should be in the game, but it wasn't.
Oh,
all
man.
the setup.
That cinematic about seeing the sphere with Titus, and then Yuna gives up being a high summoner, and
you mean the sphere with the sphere with
shit.
So I have to ask,
star player of the Xanarkand
that
Apes.
clip, like, where was that made available prior to the original release, or like what was the original
international version in Europe and Japan?
Great, thanks, Europe. The things that Europe gets, the things that Europe got that we did not get here in the United States. Fascinating list.
I think Japan even got a re-release of 10.2 with that content in it.
Yeah.
With like a 30-minute cinematic about why is Yuna wearing hot pants? Why is she singing now? Why is she Why is she not a high summoner anymore?
Yeah. There's a lot of like immediate what the hell is going on at the outset of that game.
So
wow.
then,
it's incredible.
Then right below after that cinematic is Final Fantasy X-2, and then right below that is something called Final Fantasy X-2 The Last Mission. And this is horrible. This may well be one of the worst things I have ever played. No joke. Gino can attest, I played 40 hours of Mobius Final Fantasy.
Jesus.
Well, I wouldn't say played. You watched.
You encountered?
Okay. I played 40 hours of Mobius Final Fantasy.
The game played itself for 40 hours.
I could not get past 5 hours of the last mission.
It's really bad.
It broke me in a way that Final Fantasy games have not ever broken me. Like, I could jump into Mobius right now, and I would feel okay with what I am subjecting myself to.
That's one of the darkest things I've ever heard.
It's kind of like this. Sometime when I was a teenager, I wanted to know what the internet was. And so I went into the far dark reaches of the internet. I went into the dark sides and the dark corners of Reddit and 4chan and eBaum's World and
2channel,
Tumblr and 2channel, and I wanted to know what is the internet. And then the internet broke me, and I can never enjoy the internet the same way that I used to look at it with my wide eyes and naivety. Final Fantasy X-2, The Last Mission, broke me. And I can never return to the Final Fantasy X universe ever, even if they announced Final Fantasy X-3, even if X-3 looks amazing. I can't.
Well, what about when they release?
Gone.
What about when they release the Final Fantasy X Mobius Final Fantasy expansion?
Well, I mean, I still have goodwill towards Mobius Final Fantasy, so I know that Mobius Final Fantasy will take the world of Final Fantasy X and honor it. It will elevate all of the worst attributes of Final Fantasy X, and it will be a wonderful package of nothing but bliss and eternal calm.
Well, so the problem with the last mission, from what I can tell, it starts...
Story is terrible?
It starts sometime after 10, and Riku and Yuna and Pain all get a mysterious letter, because apparently there's a post office in the world of Final Fantasy X.
That's not even the worst part. It's the fact that, you know how the end of Final Fantasy X-2, not the true ending, but like the normal ending for X-2 might actually be outside of the concert scene, the best part of it, where these three characters that felt like they were growing distant towards one another finally come together as friends, and then they'd fly into the sky because metaphor.
Yep.
You know, like the whole idea of freedom in the sky and flying, that metaphor, Freud.
Yep. Lucy in the Sky
So
with
liberation
Diamonds, yes.
And that sort of thing. Well, it turns out that the three characters basically came to hate each other immediately after the events of X-2 and are sarcastic assholes towards one another and just bully and are cynical about each other and constantly ragging on each other. And so they separated. So these three bubbly, kind of warm and welcoming characters have suddenly undergone in less than a year this massive character transformation that makes no goddamn sense.
Oh, so they had a second character change after the events of 10 when they had their first gigantic character changes?
Yep.
Okay. And then they all find each other again due to being catfished by some sort of email person or letter. They get letters, and then they go.
Did you see any of the cutscenes in the temple?
No. Why would I? No.
So every 5 or 10 levels, you see a cutscene. Every 20 levels, you face a boss. I got to the first boss, and that's basically when I said, I cannot do this. This is hurting me. This game is hurting me.
Yeah.
I need to walk away from it. And so each of the cutscenes, we'll talk about mechanics because I think this is probably one of the worst playing games I've ever seen my entire life in the modern era of video games.
Yeah, Final Fantasy X-2 felt like a mod of Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X-2, The Last Mission, feels like a mod that someone put together as a school project.
Is running through 13 emulators while it's trying to go through coaxial cables through HDMI back to coaxial.
Yeah, you know how people sometimes put together in like Gary's mod mock-ups of other types of games using the models of like Team Fortress 2's characters, and it's like, oh, I'm making the Team Fortress 2 characters do other weird stuff. It's like that, but Final Fantasy X too.
A lot of Team Fortress 2 dating sim made in Gary's mod. Now that you say that.
Oh no!
Well, now it exists because you said it out loud.
So the characters just slowly but surely, as they navigate this temple, and I only saw 2 of the cutscenes. Riku talks about how she's angry at Yuna because she's left to go be this high summoner and is wandering trying to find all these parts of her religious history, and Pain just disappeared doing Pain shit. And Riku's the one that's doing all these responsible things with Sid and Brother and Buddy and Shinra and all these characters that you remember from Final Fantasy X-2 because X-2 has the best characters in a Final Fantasy game. Bar none.
Wow.
So as you slowly navigate this tower, these characters just start to turn on each other. Like Riku becomes bitter and emboldened in terms of like loudly questioning if Yuna really is the high summoner that Spyra needs, and then Pain just feels like Riku was always annoying. It's like, I never liked you in the first place. So these characters become acidic and toxic towards one another in a way that I did not appreciate. And so you didn't see the ending. I didn't see the ending. I had to look it up, Gino. So hot spoilers for Final Fantasy X-2, The Last Mission.
Shit.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute my headphones really quick.
Okay. So you get this letter that says that there's something really cool on the top of this tower, and there are 80 levels. There's 80 levels in this tower.
Ugh.
I really enjoyed.
It took me 5 hours to get to level 20.
God.
Do the math.
I really enjoy that when you get to the tower. I think Riku says, "Good thing we can just fly our plane to the top," and then Pain says, "The letter said we should go through under our own power. We should climb the tower because that'll be more fun." And Riku says, "What's fun about climbing?" And then they just go, and then they just start climbing the tower.
A wizard did it. I don't know.
Go ahead, ZP.
So you get to the top of the tower, and guess what? There's a giant machine there, and it's broken.
Oh, no.
And then the characters all come together. It's like, maybe the whole point of this journey wasn't getting a real material reward. It was coming back together and realizing we're friends, even if we go our separate ways. And so the characters all come together, and they kind of hug. And then as they hug, the machine turns on, and it fixes itself, and it just spins around, and then it cuts and fades to black.
So is it setting up a sequel somehow, but like a bad one?
Who the fuck knows? Who the fuck cares?
Is the machine what made Titus come back to life?
I don't know.
Did they clone him?
You know, they reference Titus a couple times, but they still don't say his name.
Oh, the star player of the Xanark and Dapes.
Yeah. And so, like, their tears of unfathomable sadness and their friendship turned on this broken machine from 1,000 years ago. And then that's the end.
Well, great. So the mechanics of this game, you start on the ground floor, you pick whichever character you want, Yuna, Riku, or Pain. They are basically the same, except they have a different starting dress sphere, because like Final Fantasy X-2, this game has a dress sphere system, but unlike Final Fantasy X-2, this game system is trash.
It sucks shit.
You pick up different dress spheres and items just like on the floor, like it's like it's a rogue, like it's rogue or something.
I have no idea how this game controlled for. You played it on the PSP.
No. I played it on the PC, but I used a controller.
So the default PC controls are terrible. Oh my god.
I mean, the controller controls are terrible.
So Jeff Rud, you move around with the arrow keys because, Square Enix doesn't understand what WASD is. C is attack select command. Notice how 3 commands are on the C button.
That's a great start.
That's just the X button.
Okay, yeah, the X button is C, not the X button on the keyboard.
I know.
V is open menu, so they didn't V. And Z is select target and range, or automatically sort items in the item menu window. So again, one button serves 2 completely different purposes, depending on which screen you're on. Cancel is not C, it's X. Rotating the camera left is page up.
Fuck.
What? Page up. Turn the camera left. Page up. So guess what? Page down. Turn the camera right.
So there's an internal logic at least, but
pause is B. Zooming in the camera is the home button.
What?
Zooming the camera out is the end button.
Huh?
Rotating the camera in a 360 motion is the insert or delete button.
I'm just waiting for you to say one of these controls is the print screen button.
X plus move is move without picking up an item. D plus move is move diagonally according to the field. We'll talk about moving diagonally because it's terrible.
It is.
Z plus move is rotate character on the spot. So if you want to turn to face a different direction without picking something up or attacking a person, there you go. And
so
your turn without taking an action is X plus N.
So I'm getting from what you're saying here that this is basically a turn-based movement system on some sort of grid.
Yes, correct. It's a mystery dungeon game.
Okay, so it's full-on mystery dungeon game, like single step. Enemies move. Everything's kind of click, 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 like a TikTok cycle.
There's just a bunch of bullshit on your screen. So there's the command prompt on the bottom, which shows how many commands and like a list. It's a list of attacks that you make and movements that you make on the grid, as well as attacks that are inflicted upon you, even if they miss. So that takes up, I don't know, Gino, would you say about a quarter of the screen? The entire bottom quarter of the screen is this giant blue text box that just shows commands that you're inputting into the game.
Yeah.
So that's certainly got a nice rogue touch to it, where it's like the printout of what's going on.
You are also, you see the parts of the field that you can walk into. So Riku or Yuna or Pain can be in this blue field, can be covering their torso. And then you also see like your attack range, as if you're like a chess piece. So if you're the gunner, for example, you'll see 3 blue blocks in front of Yuna, whichever character you have, because that's your attack range. So if there are any enemies in those 3 blue boxes, you can attack and hurt them. And then you have basically the portrait, and then you have the function 1 button that shows your guild and your menu. Now, the biggest problem with mystery dungeon games in general, or my biggest problem with mystery dungeon games, is everything in the dungeon is procedurally generated. So that means you can get a bum deal when you're playing the game. So you can do everything right. Your pre-game, preparing your character, getting all your items and stuff. And it can be filled with horrible ogres, and then you're dead, and you have to start from the beginning.
Yeah, that's the thing about specifically, I guess, Rogue and also NetHack is like those games are less, and this ties back into talking about Final Fantasy 1 later, by the way. They're more about you being able to do math and kind of be able to get through a set of obstacles to get to some endpoint with the expectation you're probably going to die. And there's like a skill ceiling that's fairly high. You can get better, but it's like you're going to die along the way. Those games aren't about story or a plot. You aren't necessarily being like led along by like, yeah, but when I get to the 20th floor, they're going to give you this amazing bit of story that's going to feed into, let's say, the best entry into a JRPG series. It's just like, no, I'm just going to do the math, and sometimes the math will work against me, and that's fine. It sounds like the issue here is it's a game with that underlying framework, but the carrot is plot. So the game preventing you from seeing plot
the gameplay
sucks.
Carrot is that it is a game that is practically defined by luck.
Yeah, that's the luck is the impediment from seeing like, well, I just want to see this story.
Well, the problem with your thesis there is that no one should want to see this story. Final Fantasy X-2,
another good part too.
Final Fantasy X-2 let you know what it was about.
Yeah,
you knew. There was never going to be any satisfaction at the top of that tower, and yet you climb it. And as I was climbing, at least the first room just gave me a bunch of items and dress spheres, because unlike 10-2, which is a turn-based combat system where you use these dress spheres as kind of ways to swap between classes, this game, it has classes as well, but you pick up the dress spheres on the ground like they're just drops. And sometimes they'll randomly be on the ground. Sometimes enemies can drop them. And then you find books that you can read, and the books will do things depending on what book it is, which is crazy. Like you'll find a book
also
the saves you get
are
like
usable,
finite...
consumable items that you are randomly generated. So you might go through 5 levels before you get a save item. And this leads me to my biggest problem is that it's more of a game of chance and luck and less of a game of skill. My very first time playing this game, I had such a horrible time trying to get the right treasure combinations. I mean, the first time I played this game, I never got a save memo, which is a book that you read in order to save the game.
Well, to be fair, you don't read it to save the game, because most of the books, you have to hit the read. There's like 4 things you can do.
When you're using the elevator.
You can put, so every book you pick up, you can read it, you can put it down, you can throw it, or you can, there's a 4th option that's like destroy it or something. I thought, okay, I've got the save item, I should read the book. And then in the item description says reading does nothing. I read it anyway, and it's like, oh, you use this when you get to the elevator. Okay, great. I stood on the elevator, and I'm like, okay, now do I read it when I'm on the elevator? No. I'm like, okay, maybe I put it on the elevator, and then that saves. Nope. I tried throwing it at the elevator. That didn't do it. It turns out there's a special menu when you stand on the elevator and hit the use elevator. So you'd think that you press the action or select button when you're on the elevator, but
Sure.
that's not actually how you use it. You have to go into your menu, and then there's a menu command that's like, do action, elevator, elevator, and then you can use the elevator. And then once you get into the elevator submenu, then you can save. It's, oh God, it's so bad.
And
the menus are terrible.
The menus are terrible. You can, so it's a 6-directional game, which means up, down, left, right, and then all diagonals. Problem is that attacking and moving diagonal sucks shit. I was never able to consistently move or attack diagonally, even though my enemies had no hard time. They were able to attack and move diagonally without issue. And then my second playthrough, I had no problem getting healing items, but there's a finite amount of space that I can use you can only carry like 2 screens worth of items, and that fills up quick. Mm-hmm. And so I had no dress spheres, but I had a ton of healing items. And without dress spheres, you can't win the game. And so I was stuck in this scenario where, I get to heal, but I can't. I'm inflicting like 2 damage because I got no dress spheres. My last one broke. And so the dress spheres are only fun to use if you're able to intersplice them or kind of marry them, like wear one on top of the other. But like leveling up those dress spheres is not tied to the actual combat or using them in combat. You have to find a merge scroll and merge 2 of the similar dress spheres together.
But
which the merge scroll is also something that is randomly generated in the dungeon. So you could go 5-6 levels without ever getting one.
And you also can go 5-6 levels without getting one of the same class. And heaven help you if you try to merge a dress sphere that you're wearing, because the game doesn't like that. It's like, no, can't merge equipped dress spheres, which you'd think that's not a thing, but like not a big deal. But your inventory is, I think, 20 items, and you can equip up to 4 or 5 dress spheres at a time, which means a full fourth of your inventory requires you, if you want to use it for fusion or anything like that, you have to go into the menu and futz with your inventory in order to use those things. It's so stupid.
So this is when the moment that I realized that I needed to stop playing this is I finally got past the first boss of the game. And then a guy popped out. His name was Founder. Did you ever find Founder in the game?
No.
Gino? So guy named Founder.
I played it for like an hour and then quit.
Okay. So Founder is a randomly occurring event. That means that it will happen at least 4 or 5 times during your playthrough. And there's no solution to Founder. What Founder does is he pops out of nowhere, steals all your shit, your money, and your dress spheres, and then boots you to the beginning of the game, which is an instant game over.
What?
So
Why?
I didn't because just cuz.
So he just steals your shit and then
He steals your shit, steals all your dress spheres, all of your materials, all your items, all your gil, and then boots you to the beginning of the game.
So what do you do when he shows up?
You have to start over.
No, I mean, can
From
you
scratch.
dodge him?
Nope. Well, yes. Basically, it's kind of like the ghost from Spelunky. Like that is your sign that you need to get the fuck out of here, otherwise you are going to lose everything. But I didn't know that.
Of course.
So imagine like you playing Chutes and Ladders, and there's the one chute that goes all the way to the first level of the board. That risk exists every time you boot up the game.
Great.
So let's just we got a game that actually is a Final Fantasy game and is a video game. Let's rank this wonderful little treat. So Gino, why don't you go down the list real quick? Let's start at the top and then work ourselves to the bottom.
Okay, so is Final Fantasy X-2 : The Last Mission better than Final Fantasy IX?
No.
Okay, it's not better than Final Fantasy IX. Is it better than Final Fantasy X?
No.
Is it better than Final Fantasy VII?
Nope.
Is it better than Final Fantasy VIII?
No.
Is it better than Final Fantasy X-2? Is it better than Mobius Final Fantasy?
I think it is not. Are you going to disagree? Or okay, real talk. You said that Mobius Final Fantasy was the worst game you've ever played. Do you think that The Last Mission is better or worse than Mobius?
Okay, so this is where I come at this. Mobius Final Fantasy has an autoplay button because the game is so simple and just wants you to spend hours sitting in front of it. It is the video game equivalent of cotton candy.
No, it's a video game equivalent of a clicker game.
Yes, but I was going to flesh out my metaphor, but now you've
okay,
ruined
sure.
it.
Let's keep going about cotton candy. Show me your cotton candy.
You just put it in your mouth and then it vanishes by itself. You don't have to chew. You don't have to do anything. It's a little sweet, but ultimately not very fulfilling. I feel like that is Mobius Final Fantasy, except it's also like the cotton candy is shaped to look like a thing that you love.
Yeah.
That is pretty much what that game is. It's barely a game.
But the last mission...
The last mission is a game, and you have to play it. And I feel like somehow that's a detriment. That makes it worse than this game.
It punches you in the gut repeatedly and then laughs at you thinking that it's being funny.
Yeah,
it just sounds like
really bad.
Yeah, like just an incredibly poor implementation of an idea, which is just basically like, what if we take existing assets and strap some RNGs to it and try to make this thing like this other thing?
I'm confused. Are we talking about Final Fantasy X-2 or Final Fantasy X-2 The Last Mission?
That's what I was going to say.
I mean, it's kind of a flip of a flip, though, then. Like, it's, yeah, it sounds incredibly disappointing.
I mean, I expected nothing of it.
Disappointing is, like, not strong enough of a word.
Have either of you two seen Final Fantasy X-2 The Last Will?
No, I've not.
Jeff Rud. So apparently this is the thing where if you hit bonus audio, there's a supplementary end game, even post game Final Fantasy X-2 The Last Mission. Actually, let's just rank this. So, and then I'll talk about Will, because Will is the biggest piece of shit I have ever seen in my entire life.
Well, this game, I think Mobius it plays itself and is very, what would I say? It's very... There's nothing to it. You know, it's very transient. Every couple weeks or every couple months they release another thing for it. And it's really inoffensive.
It's inoffensive. You can play it for free. So think about this. You have to pay money to play The Last Mission.
So what I was going to say is the part that's offensive about Mobius is how it tries to addict people and then take their money. But The Last Mission, you have to pay for it.
3 hours without paying a single dollar, Gino.
That's true. Wait, does that mean you have paid $1? Because you said you played 40 hours.
No. I've played 40 hours without even a single cent going into it.
I don't know, man. Because this game...
It tries to be a game, and then it's the worst playing game we've ever played outside of Sonic: The Dark Brotherhood.
I'm not going to go that far.
I think this is worse playing than Sonic: The Dark Brotherhood.
I think it's bad, but it's, I don't know how much worse it is than something like Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon or any of the Mystery Dungeon.
We haven't ranked that yet, so I'm not saying that we have hit the bottom of the floor.
But Mobius is just such a nothing, like there's nothing to it.
Absolutely not. You create your little deck, and you create cards that are elemental, have elemental affinities, and then you merge Magicite into levels. There's a depth to it. It's just you have to buy into the economy if you want to see it.
Yeah, but that's bad.
Well, I mean, it starts out as free. I bet that if I wanted to get the maximum game of Mobius Final Fantasy, it would be no more or less than the HD remaster of 10 and 10-2.
Yeah, but the part where you play Mobius isn't fun. It just happens in front of you.
Come on, it's just like a clicker game where I click to see instant gratification.
You click to see the numbers go up, but that's not really fun.
There's something to that, because when I tried to see the numbers go up in The Last Mission, like it refused, and the interface and UI were so bad that I wasn't able to do it, and there was no sense of progression, and I could see the mechanics like kludge up. Whereas with Mobius Final Fantasy, it's a well-oiled machine that's meant to just show me a bunch of stuff in front of my face, but admittedly, the process of doing that is sinister.
So I would say that the difference here is, do you prefer processed food that is, it's well made, but ultimately probably bad for you and not necessarily...
Gino.
It's the same. It's there's a craft to it, but it's bad for you. Or do you prefer, like a child learning how to cook and the food that they make? It's also bad and has a lot of problems, but maybe someday...
No, never. There's no upside to Final Fantasy X-2 The Last Mission, because you know that this franchise is dead and dead forever. with Mobius Final Fan. Gino, you're talking to someone who brags to you at least once a week about ordering from the Burger King dollar menu.
I know you do. And stop. You need to find a better thing to brag about.
Why do I keep learning dark things about you?
Taco Bell dollar menu is even better though, man. Like they got that new. They got that new. Oh man, the Taco Bell dollar menu. That's Breakfast of Champions.
I can rep the Taco Bell part of this conversation. That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm back in it.
So, I guess where I land on this is.
Burrito.
Oh fuck! The part of my brain says the right thing to do is to put Mobius at the bottom because it's so fucking insidious. But there's another part of my head that says I would play Mobius again, and I will never play the Last Mission ever again.
And also, how about this? Here's the upside to Mobius. Mobius and Brave Exodus made like $900 million, almost $1 billion for Square, and their stock price last year went up 78%. And so now they're going to be able to fund future game development. There's nothing that is gained from the Last Mission.
Fine. I can allow the Last Mission to be the worst Final Fantasy.
Yes.
I can allow that. So, Final Fantasy, The Last Mission, go fuck yourself.
So,
You're the worst Final Fantasy.
Normally we would call an end to the podcast, but we have a guest here. And like I said at the beginning, you're the one that says, Chris, why did you make me play this horrible goddamn game? And this time, I feel like I can say, Gino, why did you make me play this horrible goddamn game?
Because we needed to learn history. Because Final Fantasy 1 is a game that I feel... We've played so many, we should go to the Origins, and 2, it's the shortest one. And the Community Endurance Run is only a few months away, and we wanted to do 13, so I needed to pick the one that we could actually finish in between the beginning of the year and like April. So that's why I picked it, and
we're all the worse.
It's not very good, unfortunately. I haven't played it in a while.
Gino, look me directly in the eyes, even though my camera's not working. Don't break my heart again like this.
Well, we're gonna get further in.
Heart.
We played for this Final Fantasy 1. We played up until you basically you defeat an Elf King, and then you get access to the ocean, basically the full world map. We played up until that, so we have not dealt with any of the crystal stuff. We haven't dealt with any of the iconic bosses yet. Up until now, it's basically all been knockoff D&D.
Filler. Like, just kind of like the horrible filler that they put in Twinkies. Just, it makes you feel sick to your stomach, and you just got these empty calories wasting away in your gut.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So what is the play time that you both racked up so far?
Gino, you go first.
Like 3 hours? 3-4 hours, maybe?
Oh, no shit.
So where did we all stop? Because I stopped at when I first entered the Dwarven mine cave system. Where did you stop, Gino?
Like right after that. The town, right after you go to the dwarves, they blow up. Like, they allow you to go to the larger world map, and I just went to the first town after that.
Jeff Rud?
I'm at 11 hours 30.
No. Where are you?
I have just woken up the elf prince, which I'll talk a little about why.
What the fuck?
Wait, what?
Okay, so
I'm at 4 hours and I just got to the dwarves.
I have a lot to say about Final Fantasy 1.
Yes, you have a lot to say.
Okay, so here's the other unfortunate thing that you've done now is you've actually brought a person with a history degree onto the show. So I brought notes.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I know.
God, no.
Yeah. This will be the end of the show.
But, so as I mentioned, like, it feels like 100 years ago now, I beat Final Fantasy 1, the Game Boy Advance port in like 2004. I kind of started this on short notice. So I'm playing the PlayStation 1 port that is bundled into a compilation called Origins on my Vita right now. So over the years, I have kind of become interested in the theory craft around Final Fantasy 1. And I've kind of become interested in like the way people like fiddle with the stuff in the margins of this game. There's a writer online who runs a website. His name is Sola. That's his like handle. He does a lot of writing about Civ 5 and Civilization 6 and 4. And he's also done a lot of Final Fantasy 1 stuff. And the thing that I've found most like interesting to read about is this stuff about doing solo runs over the years. With basically you start the game and you let 3 of your party members die, and then you just beat the rest of the game with 1 character.
Oh, God.
So I'm not doing that because I'm very time constrained, because I basically started doing this on Monday.
I started doing this yesterday.
But I thought of like, okay, well, I want to play this with some sort of handicap. So I'm playing it with 3 characters right now. I'm doing a monk, a white mage, and a black mage.
Oof.
Yeah, so they're all at level 11 right now, and I'm doing just fine. But it kind of involved me tackling most of the dungeons in like sortie form, where I'm kind of going in, scraping stuff, going back out, going to an inn, going back into the dungeon. So I'm playing this in a way that let's call is suboptimal, but kind of to play with these systems. Which my thesis in this game is it is basically a game about systems. It is I forget the name of the gentleman who was on the regular show, but it is a Grindfather's game. If you Billy, yes. This is like the Grindfather game in a lot of ways. You can make it really grindy, especially if you want to do the solo version. The thing about playing with 3 characters is basically everyone gets a 33% experience boost throughout the entire game. And if you're playing with a monk, which I'll talk about later, the game's also kind of a pushover. It's just a matter of like being conservative.
Yeah, I would say first things first about Final Fantasy 1, it is a really simple game. You start out with 4 characters who are the crystal bearers. They each have a crystal. It is the Final Fantasy story. There are crystals. There are 4 heroes. They need to save each of the crystals from monsters that are trying to destroy them and drain them of their magical powers. And you start the game by just kind of picking what character classes you'd want each of your characters to be. And each of the character classes are some D&D-ass character classes.
Yes.
Warrior, thief, monk, white mage, black mage, red mage. And those are kind of the Final Fantasy character types, too.
Yeah, like a red mage would be something like a sorcerer who's got kind of all magic available to him, but yeah.
You guys are speaking Pig Latin to me right now, but keep going.
Yeah, red mages can use a combination of all of the different magic types, and also they're kind of okay on physical attacking as well. And they get to wear like decent armor, so they're in the middle of everything. You could probably beat the game with just 4 red mages because they'd be able to do everything.
Guess who tried that?
Yeah. So can I talk a little bit about to frame this game a little bit?
Sure.
I'll really skim these. Okay, so
of course.
So there's basically 2 root causes for Final Fantasy I's existence. The first one is that it was kind of a capstone on a career originally for Sakaguchi Hironobu, who had basically dropped out of college with a friend to go work at Square to make games. The company had basically cut its teeth doing like games for basically the FM7 and other like Japanese PCs in 1984. And he had been involved with basically their first work in 1984, The Death Trap, kind of everything forward from there. And it basically wasn't working out as lucrative as he was hoping. So his scheme was, I'm going to basically do one last like Parthian shot as I'm going out the door. And the thing he chose was basically something that resonated with kind of the dominant trend in Japanese like home gaming at the time, which was kind of like, I guess, semi-permanence. It was kind of like RPG mechanics, more or less. Dragon Quest I came out about 18 months before this in May of 1986. Dragon Quest II came a little less than a year after that in January 87. And Final Fantasy I was first released at the end of 87. So the hot trend after Dragon Quest I, the things that most developers took away from that game was not necessarily like, it's a game with charming, simple characters and like it's straightforward. And the thing they took away was everything should have like experience. Like everything should have experience, which isn't a horrible idea, but it leads to crazy shit. Like Namco's first fighting game, Tenkaichi Bushi, which was a Famicom game, was basically an RPG. Like, you wandered around the world playing, like, basically the worst fighting game you've ever played because you had to level up to, like, learn how to fight good.
Oh,
great.
It's pretty rotten. That's, like, one example of, like, literally hundreds of, like, Famicom and Disk System and MSX games that were just like, it's a shooter, but it's an RPG. Or it's a fighting game, but it's an RPG. Or a beat 'em up, an RPG, though. Like Retro City Rampage, this kind of thing. So it was kind of taking that concept, but it was also looking towards PC stuff, which was kind of Square's wheelhouse. Specifically Wizardry, and to a certain extent, Ultima.
I have some things to say about that, but keep going.
So Wizardry... So Ultima is kind of a very, very loose signpost for the series. That's Richard Garriott's stuff. The first one was released in 1981, I believe. Wizardry was actually... It's one of these series that was developed in the West, but for some reason or another became way bigger in Japan than it ever did here.
I was just talking to Gino about this, but keep going.
Yeah, so Wizardry 1, 2, and 3 were all out by the time Final Fantasy 1 had come out.
Before.
And, oh yeah, you're right. And they were games basically about party composition. Like, there were... There is a story, there is a plot, but it's less about that and more about, like, I am assembling my A team and going through a series of challenges. Okay, so let's go there. So tell me what your take on Wizardry is.
I think the fact that this game is clearly heavily borrowing ideas from D&D and Wizardry and Ultima and even Heroes of Might and Magic shows how sterile and half-baked all of its ideas are. And if you're going to throw stones at the king, like, don't throw stones that will kill you if you get them thrown back at you. It's like,
I don't necessarily disagree. I think I
think that like Ultima 4 has one of my favorite stories from the classic computer role-playing game eras ever.
Ultima 4 is
Wizardry
like...
1 through 3. Wizardry 3 has a very in-depth narrative. It's kind of like a proto Dark Souls game, if anything, because it relies on you exploring the environment and exploring your surroundings to learn more about the lore, where every weapon and item has its own little biography that clues you into the circumstances that surround you. And there's none of that in Final Fantasy 1.
You're certainly right about that. Yeah.
It's amazing to me that this game ends up becoming kind of the stalwart, if you will, of the JRPG genre. Because if you look at this game in complete isolation of what it would eventually become, I don't see a franchise out of this unless future iterations really change either the mechanics, which they did do, and the structure of the story, which they also did do. But taken in complete isolation, this game feels like a developer trying to make their very first role-playing game. And it's painfully obvious that it's their first role-playing game or style of role-playing game like this.
Yeah, and I mean, that is basically true. This is basically their first crack at that format of game. And yeah, I think the real strength of this game ultimately, and it's kind of what I was talking about with this like solo run, is the kind of modular nature of how you can play it. I did some like back of napkin, I can talk math, and it looks like there's a really 2,058 basically viable parties that you could build for this game. When you factor in that you can play with basically one character, which is a lot. That's a lot of different ways you can compose a thing, but it's sort of an hourglass shaped diagram you can kind of picture where it's like, because it's very general, the plot's going to be terrible and nothing really matters. And like, you have no real impact on the world and the story is very simple.
And
to the opposite end,
which
is like, versus like something like Zelda or East, where it's like, there's a single character and it's very individual. And it's very specific about you, but it's also very rigid as a result.
But again, I think that... keep going. I apologize.
like you see some remnants of this in like Final Fantasy X, where it's like, yeah, you have the ability to change like Tidus's name, but the game kind of has to work around you anyway. So like Tidus's role in Final Fantasy X feels fairly like loose. He's kind of there as a witness to events, feels like most of the time. And I feel like Final Fantasy I is kind of a game where, such as the plot matters at all, you're kind of just asked to go do fetch quests for 99% of the runtime, which is all we did in our first chunk of this game.
So, real quick, I've been meaning to ask this. Which version of the game did you guys play?
I played PS1.
PS1.
I played the GBA port.
Yeah.
And so you guys are playing this on the PlayStation, correct? The PlayStallion?
Yes. So the PlayStation 1 port is a port of the WonderSwan remake of the game. The GBA version is more or less a port of the WonderSwan version, with a couple major differences. The first major difference is it's using the underlying math and framework of the easy version on the PlayStation port. So health levels are different, experience gains are different, this sort of thing. The other difference is, and this is kind of a key weird thing to get your head around if you're coming into this game having only played like later versions of Final Fantasy, is it uses a Vancian magic system. So what that means is, instead of having a pool of magic points, you have basically daily spells that you prepared.
What?
Wait, does the GBA version not have a finite number of uses?
No, they switched over to MP in the GBA version.
Yeah, you guys don't have MP and HP?
No.
We have HP, but MP instead is like you get to use 4 level 1 spells, 3 level 2 spells, 2 level 3 spells, and 1 level 4 spell.
And then as you level up your magic users, they get more additional uses of spells.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I love the game that I'm playing.
They've both got strengths, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Okay, so
I like it. It's interesting having it this way, because I originally played the GBA version. I did not remember this like magic system, and I thought that it was just that I had forgotten.
Okay. So Gino, plug your ears real quick, because I'm going to talk about the version that I'm playing. You don't like what I did to get this version of the game.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So Jeff Rud, I'm playing this game emulated using like an emulator.
Hold on. Can you say that a little louder into this microphone that I have going to the RIAA? Okay.
I am playing an emulated version of Dawn of Souls.
Okay, you'll probably be getting a visit pretty soon.
I'm using the Visual Boy Advance to play.
Listeners, do not tell the cops.
So VBA is a suck-ass emulator, man.
Huh? What? No, it's fine. It's just every now and again, like the upper right-hand corner of the screen gets all weird pixelated nonsense.
Anyway.
Okay. So, full disclosure, I tried to play the NES version of Final Fantasy I, and I got about 1 hour into it, and I was like, this is the cruelest game I've ever played my entire life. This is mean. This is cruel. Why are these attacks just attacking nothingness? Oh, wait, the characters are dead, and the attacks aren't carrying over into the next enemy. This is me. This is horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to do this anymore because it looks bad and the music's terrible.
So ZombiePie, what if I told you that one of the options in the WonderSwan and PS1 ports of Final Fantasy I is to turn back on that? So by default,
you would have to be a crazy person to do that.
Yeah, so I actually, when I was tapped to come on the show and do this, I was like, well, I've played the GBA version. I know what the PS1 version's basically about. I want to go for the NES. So I spent 2 hours on the NES version and got everyone leveled up to level 3, doing this weird 3-person party thing that I've alluded to. And I realized very quickly that just the pace that game moves at, I wasn't going to get done in time to really have a conversation about it. So the things I'll say is are the thing I will say is, that's how you'd conjugate that.
You got there.
Yeah. if you've got the time to sit with a 30-year-old game, because at this point this game is 30 years and 1 month old, it's worth seeing and it's worth touching for a little while. But at this point, your brain, if you have played any video games made after about 1994, is going to move faster than Final Fantasy actually moves on the Famicom. So if you want to have anything like a good time with this game, I'd recommend giving that one a pass and play one of the ports, because it's actually just crawls. It's unbearably slow.
What is unusual to me is that this is an important franchise to Square Enix. I think we can all agree with that part, right? Did I say anything controversial? Okay. No, I don't. So this is an important franchise to Square Enix, the Final Fantasy franchise. Playing a legal version of Final Fantasy 1, 2, and even 3 isn't that easy. 3 has a very bad Android iOS version on Steam.
So all of these games have bad Android or iOS or mobile versions that you can play right now if you want to.
Yeah, and I almost did that, full disclosure. Just to see.
I tried to do that, and then I found out the version of Android that I have does not like anything that Square Enix makes.
I mean, that's on you for not having the good Android phones that can play the good games.
Like Final Fantasy 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, man. So, yes, I am emulating this game. I like to take screen caps for the blog, so that makes my life easy. Yeah, I might swap. I should have gotten a better emulator, but who cares? And then also emulation of PS1 games, it's not where it needs to be still. It will never be there.
Yeah.
It will never be there.
So what classes... So, Jeff, you are playing with a black mage, white mage, and a monk. ZP, what are your characters?
Well, you told me not to do this, and I ended up doing this for like 3 hours before I realized I had made a horrible mistake, but I had rocked a party that was all red mages.
You can actually probably beat the game like that, but that's still
one of the
easy.
better like monoclass parties, honestly.
Then I went all black mages.
That's terrible. Don't do that.
And then I ended up doing warrior, monk, white mage, black mage.
That is my party composition.
That is like the classic get through the game party.
Now I will say, of the 3 people that are on this wonderful triage, this is my first time going through this game. And when you are presented these character classes, the game does not really explain what you are committing to for the duration of the game. Nope. And I feel like that's to the fault of the game. It's like, oh, thief. Do you know what thief means? Not really. I don't know what thief is. It's been years since I played one of these classic D&D style games or JRPGs.
Thief means it's a terrible class.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I get that. I had to look up like I literally Googled Final Fantasy 1 character class tier list. And then this is why I reached the character classes that I ended up going with, because it said shit tier thief.
Yeah, but there isn't even a steal command, so they do shit damage, are fast, and have shit armor.
Yeah, the one thing a thief is good for is running away from combat, which is a really good way to never gain experience or money.
But again, my whole problem is that you have to make this pretty important choice. And the game doesn't really clue you into what you're doing. If you basically are judging these characters purely by the way they are dressed, the way that their names work, and that's basically it.
But ZombiePie, you should have read the manual.
There's no bars, there's no star ranking system. You don't know what... And then, again, I'm jumping into this game the first time, and it's like, acceleration? What the fuck does acceleration mean? What does ACC mean? What does evasion actually mean? What do any of these stats mean? And normally when you're like, especially with the Ultima and Wizardry franchises, when you pick your class, you have to pick traits and stuff like that. And there's a long biography about the traits that you're picking and how they will benefit to a thief class or a rogue class. Deep cut there, rogue, not thief. Yeah. That's the way we call it, because that's the right term for it. Or your crusader or anything like that, is that there's a long explanation. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have virtually...
Well, that's always true.
Yes, but even then, there's like a Moogle that says, hey, this is what a thief is really good at. Oh, you're an Onion Knight? Let me tell you about an Onion Knight. For like 15 minutes, and it's the worst, and I end up picking my nose and picking my ears, and I completely gloss over the tutorial. But at least the game tried. In Final Fantasy I, the only tutorial you get is when you go into the inn, which you have no idea why you want to go into the inn until after you've been there. There's 4 bozos that are saying, hey, you want to learn about this mechanic in the game? But it's not the mechanics that you kind of need to know or want to know about?
Yeah,
I'm just going to talk about formations. And I still have no idea what the formation system in this game means.
Yeah, this game teaches its lessons. This game teaches its lessons by sticking a knife in your belly and then whispering in your ear as you slowly bleed out.
Yeah.
So
you want to run away from battles that are too hard.
And then
it takes the knife out.
So, but here's the good thing. I have not gotten a game over. I have not gotten a game over at all.
Well, that's good. I have a few times. I'm playing on... So, Jeff, in the PS1 version, are you playing on easy or normal?
I'm playing on normal.
I'm also playing on normal. So that is probably the difference if ZP yours is easy versus ours is normal. Because some of the stuff in normal is pretty messed up. I'm not complaining.
Yeah,
I
dude,
kind of wished I had put it on easy.
For a 30-year-old game like this, don't be ashamed. Just go. Have fun. Have the fun you're going to have.
So my characters' names are Stabby for the warrior, Punchy for the monk, Healy for the white mage, and Vivi for the black mage. Any fun names for your goofballs?
You go first, Jeff Rud.
Well, I always have a Truxton. So Truxton is my monk. I was thinking of a good name for a white mage, so I went with Shrek.
Solid pick.
Yeah, which is funny because you fight a shit ton of ogres. And
they're the worst.
Yeah. Black mage is named Sega. And then the thief who died in the second fight I got into is named Meme. So I just have a corpse laying at the bottom of my screen that's named Meme forever.
Great.
Because he's a meme. Haha.
You made a joke.
I did. It's good.
So, as with any emulated game, it always takes a solid, I want to say, 2 minutes to get used to the controls of any emulated game, because you basically are putting your fate into the hands of this person who's ripped this ROM file. So it took me a while to even figure out how to use. So I'm using the arrow keys. Z is select, X is cancel, and then enter is the menu system. So it took me forever to pick names for my characters. But when I did, I almost did something that I could have regretted, but I ended up not doing something that I regretted. So again, I picked the 4 classes that I heard were good in combat, but I ended up calling my characters. My first character is I, the letter I. My second character, all caps, just the letter I. Regret.
It's a good name.
The third character was My, M-Y.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to put an S at the end, but the game just cannot process more than 6 letters. So it's I regret my choice. I wanted to say choices, but I was just going to have to stick with choice.
That's fair.
Before, and I also lost my, because, emulation, so it's just such a reliable way to play games, right? Am I right, guys? Nothing bad happens when you play emulated games. My original party was called I Regret This Choice. And then I lost my save for that game file, which is unfortunate, but
that's what you deserve.
I'll tell you, this game, I'll say some positives before I start saying negative things. This GBA version, it's real colorful. It's got a lot of colors. I like the chibi anime-esque animations to some of the characters. And
it's some
of the boss designs are interesting.
The art for both of these versions that we're playing is actually from the Wonder Swan remake. It's about something like 5 or 8 times up-resed for the PlayStation 1 and maybe 3 times up-resed for the GBA. The Wonder Swan was like a shockingly low-resolution screen on it. And yeah, it pops pretty well. I remember that GBA version looking okay.
Yeah, the game looks okay, and the music on the PS1 version is actually solid. I think they re-recorded some music because I hear some non-chiptune-y stuff.
Yeah.
Sounds like an actual flute occasionally.
The city theme sounds pretty like guitar-ish.
Yeah.
It's pretty close if it's not an actual guitar. So
when you go to the class menu and you're picking your classes, I think it's worth mentioning each of the classes. The warrior class, I think, is the best class by a pretty wide margin. The only downside is it costs money to have all the best items for the warriors, but they are the best. Like, they deal a ton of damage, they have a ton of health, they have very good armor. With a shield, they even have decent evasion. They destroy everything. And in the early game, if you get them the good armor, they take almost no damage and deal 100 very easily, when your other characters are dealing like 2. And then the monk is very solid, though they don't have good armor, but eventually they're bare-handed, bare-fist attacks.
I love how the stats for the monk drop as you put more equipment on them. I think that's hilarious. So it's like, I just imagine this character running around buck-ass naked punching fools in the face. And that was the endless supply of hilarity.
So here's the thing about the monk. The monk should never, ever, ever really wear anything that isn't called a ribbon, or hold any weapons ever. The monk basically gets a natural defense equal to his own level. The monk has a pretty good evasion stat that just grows. The monk versus the warrior thing is an example of the classic RPG trope called basically linear warrior versus quadratic other thing, where ceteris paribus, basically the board and sword fighter, is going to get like incrementally better over time, whereas this other class may start weaker, but by the end game is going to be like...
You're on the gravy train.
Yes, like ridiculous. So the thing about the monk is barehanded. He basically will wind up getting enough hits such that by the time things hit level 9 in that game, a monk will always be a better damage dealer than a warrior. Always. They may not be better at absorbing damage, but if you can like live through the first barrages or so of a boss, a monk's just going to murder it.
I think I still have nunchucks on my monk. I'll try that out.
Yeah,
because I'm level 21, I think.
Oh, yep, throw them away. Yeah, you're ready to go.
I'm level 7 and I have nunchucks, but they don't need armor either. I thought they used armor.
They can use weapons and armor, but they are actually just a better character with no equipment at all. Okay. Which so my main constraint with money basically has been buying a certain amount of potions and spells.
I am in the same situation.
I
have no shortage of gil right now.
I use some speedrun tactics, but before I mentioned that, the other classes, like we said, Thief is terrible. White Mage, Black Mage gets to use some good magics. White Mage gets all the good healing magic. Black Mage gets all the good damage magic. Their physical attacks are terrible. And in the PS1 version, with the limited number of spells per day, it's really weird.
I think the magic system, regardless, is bad in this game. Like having to buy magic spells in different distinct locations and different distinct cities is the worst freaking way to have magic and not be it skill tree or acquired items or scrolls. I find getting the magic in this game just subjects me to, great, now I have to go back to Elven Town and pick up the level 4 white magic there, and up the next city over there, it's got the level 4 dark magic that I want, but I didn't have the money for it when I first was there. I find the magic system in this game to be just a constant frustration. Constant frustration. And
the thing is, it's not like it's that mechanically different from later iterations of the game, because the broad concept that they're working with is if we were to put this in today's game terms, you get the trash free currency from like almost everything you do, and you can spend that on things eventually. So like in Final Fantasy X, this would be like eventually you build enough points to move stuff on a sphere grid, and you unlock Fire Aga naturally that way. The difference is in Final Fantasy X, to continue that example, the way you bought Firaga was in a menu. It was there available to you like immediately at all times. Where it falls apart in this is it's literally I have to get into my boat and sail to this other part of the world, and like 3 trash mobs are going to interrupt me on the way. I'm going to get into town, and I have to spend an exorbitant amount of money so I can have fire too.
And then these towns are not. Whoever is the city planner of these towns fucking sucks at their jobs so much.
God,
like I spent forever trying to find the level 4, not the level 3 white magic seller in the Elven town, because there's 2, and then there are 2 black magic people, and then the potion seller is on the complete opposite corner of the armor and weapons seller. Oh my god. Oh my freaking god.
Really something.
And then there are just these shrubbery and bushes that are blocking your way. It's like, great, I'm in this dead end. Now I have to go all over.
Yeah, it's like they took the guy who did dungeon design, which we'll talk about in a minute, and put him on designing towns too. Elfheim's a mess. I can't say anything to defend it. Jeez.
I mean, the dungeons are a mess.
Yeah.
When you start out, you're in a town, and the town is there's trouble in Corneria. A princess has been captured by Garland, an evil knight who has turned on the town, and you have to prove that you are the Warriors of Light by defeating Garland. So you go to this abandoned castle on the outskirts of town, you defeat Garland, you take the princess back, then the town of Cornelia will make a bridge for you so that you can leave and go to the next section. In the next section, there's like a fork in the road. One way you can go to Matoya's cave, and there's nothing in there for you except to let you know that you'll eventually need to come back. And then if you go the other way on the fork, you get to a town where there are pirates in town. You kick the shit out of the pirates, then you get their ship. Then you can use that ship to get to Elfheim. At Elfheim, they tell you that, the king elf is in trouble. He needs some sort of potion, and this evil elf king, this dark elf king, has stolen the crown, or he's for some reason you need to get a crown from a cave, a marsh cave.
And you got to bring it to a guy that you've never met before, who's not a king, but he's kind of a king. So you got to bring the king. Then he betrays you, and then he has the eyeball for the lady that's in the cave, who has the potion that wakes up the Elven King.
Yeah,
it like becomes exhibits all up in this game. Like, I heard you like spinning rims, so we put rims on your rims on your rims.
It's like a chain of bullshit flags that feels like just positively ancient now. Yeah. Like, there's no way around it.
The quest goes, you get a ship, and then you go to Elfheim. You go from Elfheim to a cave, which gets you a crown. You take the crown, you go to the Dark Elf King. You defeat the Dark Elf King, which gets you the Crystal Eye. Then you have to sail back to Matoya's cave. Matoya gives you the Jolt Potion. And then you take the Jolt Potion to the regular Elf King. You give him the potion. He gives you the Mystic Key. You then need to take the Mystic Key and open treasure chests that are in Elfheim.
Corneria specifically is the one that you need to open. The only
but you can also open ones in Corneria, in Elfheim, in
the Chaos Dungeon where the first boss was.
Yep.
And then you get the Mystic Key, then you can go to like these 4 different locations that had doors that were locked. Yeah. And then you have to go all over the place just to pick them up because they have some of the best weapons in the early portion of the game. But then you have to go through
nitro powder.
Then you have to go through the swamp dungeon all over again, and then there's a dwarf there who wants TNT, but that's actually something that you need to use the Mystic Key in Corneria, and you open up the chest that's next to the thingamajig, and then you have to bring it back to the dwarf, and you give him his TNT, and then it blows up this cave that can now lead you through a navigable place.
Yeah, that's the entire first part of the game. That's basically the extent of the story. The way you find out that you have to do any of this is by talking to random NPCs. And so, there's always one or two that will be like, oh, this is the next jump, or the next 2 jumps on the chest coin.
I've heard there's an evil king in this castle in the middle of nowhere who has, so the first 2 bosses of this game are in discrete, they suck. They're also in discrete, dungeon / castle locations where they're the only thing in them. The Chaos Dungeon has a couple chests, but Astos' little dungeon castle is just literally a guy in a throne in the middle of a dungeon with nothing in it. The Chaos Dungeon is basically the same design. The nicest thing that you can say about both of those is you enter them, you take maybe 20 steps forward, and boom, there's the boss. But every 5 steps you take, you have a random encounter. Not
in those places.
Not in those 2. But when you get that, that's all that can really be said. They're really wasted. Well, they'd be wasted opportunities if the combat isn't what it is in this game, which is to say basic.
Yeah, and the one thing that got me through this was the speedrun tactics.
Yeah, so tell me what you did.
So I watched the speedrun of this game because I saw that it was 3 hours, and I was like, "Oh, yes."
Yeah, sign me up.
So what you do? Are you aware of the sliding block puzzle in this game?
Yeah, what? I've not. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I ended up going to the Power Peninsula. Which is why I'm at level 21.
Yeah, that's another really good option.
I've not gone to the Power Peninsula. What I did was once you get the ship, it's where?
It's baller. The Power Peninsula is baller.
Yeah.
Is it called the Power Peninsula? Is that its name?
Yeah, the peninsula. There's one basically in every Final Fantasy game, fun fact. But
it's like the place furthest from hell, farthest from heaven from Final Fantasy VIII. Think that.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. Okay, well, once you get the ship, if you hold the X button, which is like the accept button, and then hit the cancel button, which is circle in my case, 55 times when you're in the ship, you get taken to a mini game where you have a sliding block. Imagine one of those sliding tile puzzles where there's one slot that's empty.
It's
and
a
you
4x4 one of those.
Yeah, and it goes from 1 to 15. Yep. And you have to arrange the blocks in order from 1 to 15. And the faster you do it, the better your reward is. If you complete it in under 2 minutes, you get 10,000 gil in the PS1 version. Yes.
It's in the GBA version too. You should really abuse the fuck out of this when you get a chance. I don't know that it gives you as much money in the GBA version. In the PS1 version, if you do it in under 2 minutes, it's 10,000 gil. If you do it in under 3 minutes, it's 5,000 gil. And it keeps going. The rewards get worse and worse and worse the slower you go. But doing that, I was able to get 20,000 gil before I even got to Elfheim. Mm-hmm. So I just bought the Mithril Sword, which is better than everything. At this point in the game, and my warrior just one-shots things. Yep.
It's pretty great.
All right. I have some questions with these 2 wonderful Final Fantasy I experts.
Yeah, sure.
Playing this game for my first time, this game feels like an aimless wasteland of disparate locations, and knowing where to go sucks so much. Do you know how many hours I lost because I would go into one direction only to find out that it was a dead end?
Yeah. There's plenty of little blind alleys.
Why would you do this to where? Too. And then that swamp cave where you go through it, and if you go up, you end up going an entire level only to find that there's no fucking ladder that leads to the place where you find the crown. This fucking game just wants you to go in this one direction and just find out that it's a dead end.
Yep. Yeah,
why?
There's some gil to clear out.
Why would you do that?
But yeah, there's not a lot in that first that north going fork there in that dungeon. There's some gil. I think there's a copper bracelet or something. So
and there are just caves that have nothing to do with the main story. I went into the Earthlink cave right next to the Chaos Shrine, thinking that was going to take me to the Chaos Shrine. It did not. It did not.
I think you need to go there eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but why is there this entire navigable world right next to this important world? And then I'm totally in the opposite place where I am. And now I'm at low HP. So now I have to desperately go back to Cornelia or whatever the fuck it's called. Go to the inn, sleep for a little bit, then try again. Wham, bam, pajama Sam.
Yeah, this only saving at inns is pretty archaic and terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, and let's talk about the fucking church guy, because guess who made the mistake of having a character get KO'd and paying the money to the guy at church thinking that, oh, you're going to revive him and he's going to be at full health. Let's jump into the battle right now.
Nope.
Yeah.
And then, oh, shit, he's only at 1 HP. Well, fuck.
Yeah, so the first resurrect spell you get for your white mage does that too.
But
it's
this game penalizes you, like, the very early portion of the game. Like, a death is a big freaking deal because all of your options in terms of reviving that character are dire. You can either A, go back to the church and pay the priest to revive your character, but that is only accessible in city locations. So let's say you're in the marsh trying to get the crown and you have your character keel over halfway or into the second dungeon there. Walking all the way back to that city, Cornelia, is going to take you a solid 20 minutes.
And you're down a character that whole way and you can get killed by any of those trash mobs.
Yeah, and then also that character that's KO'd is going to get absolutely none of those experience points, and now you have a character that's way behind everyone else.
Yep.
Or you can buy Phoenix Downs, which are 500 gil in the early portion of the game, which doesn't sound like much, but when you don't know about the sliding block puzzle or the Peninsula of Power, money is not easy to come by. And the viable sources of money in the world of Final Fantasy I is to find tougher enemies. And some of those tough enemies can very much off you with relative ease.
Would you like me to tell you something else fun, ZombiePie, about the non-GBA versions?
Yes.
Phoenix Downs don't exist.
What?
Yeah, I don't have any. That sounds great, having 500 monies that you can give to get your character back. I couldn't revive my characters at not a town for the entire duration I played this game.
I don't remember which game they first appeared in, but they weren't in the original Final Fantasy I. So the GBA version added in Phoenix Downs. Mercifully. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it, homeboy.
So you're having it easy. We're walking uphill
Baby's
both ways in the
Final
snow.
Fantasy. We killed him. He's gone.
He's too upset.
Oh, yeah. Man.
Yeah, this game
is punishing in ways that feel unfair.
It's punishing in ways that make it feel like it's over 30 years old. I think is like playing this now is an interesting academic exercise, and like I still think there's merit to playing it, but it's not something I would like. I like Final Fantasy VII. I was thinking about playing one of the older games. It's like, I'm going to hand you 4
or 5.
Maybe talk to you about 3, but
4, 5, or 6.
Yeah,
but not 1, not 2, not 3.
Really, not 2. Oh boy.
Oh God, Gino, can we pretend 2 doesn't exist, please?
No,
please.
We're gonna have to.
Hey
play
Jeff,
2 at
do you
want
to come back when we do 2? I think I killed him. So, man.
I own 2 now, so.
So I've been I'm glad, Jeff, you brought this up, because I've been trying to rack my mind around as this newcomer of this game. Like, can I appreciate this game as a historical artifact? Yes, I can. Do I think that Final Fantasy I is a good game? And even as a historical artifact, I don't think this is a good game. And the clearest parallel I can think of.
7. I mean, 7's more of a historical artifact at this point.
Let me say what I'm going to say.
Sure.
Both of you guys are aware of this genre of games called fighting games, right?
Yes.
Yes.
They exist.
I've played them.
They're not something to be denied. Street Fighter 2 is a pretty important game. Street Fighter 2 is probably one of the greatest fighting games ever made, regardless of which version of Street Fighter 2 is made.
Sure.
Street Fighter 1 is unequivocally a terrible game.
Mm-hmm.
Street Fighter 1 is bad. I played Street Fighter 1 as a novelty. It is a bad game. Is it important? Yes, it provided financial stability to Capcom and led to Street Fighter 2. But Street Fighter 1 is bad. Final Fantasy 1 created a financially stable environment in which this team was able to try new ideas and immerse themselves with an emerging market that was underrepresented on the NES. Mm-hmm. And they struck the iron when it was hot. But in comparison to what it's trying to borrow or pay homage to, or in some cases rip off, it is amazing that Square was able to craft a franchise out of this game. I know I've said that before. I think this is a bad game.
You know what's even more amazing? It allowed them to create a stable, financially solvent environment to make risks, to make great games like Final Fantasy II.
Yeah.
Wait, that didn't kill the franchise either. Well, it allowed them to make great things like Final Fantasy III. What?
So there are two things about this, and I think they're kind of related. And I guess one's to say that I think the example of early JRPGs kind of remains Dragon Quest 1 in a lot of ways, and maybe Dragon Quest 3, arguably. Because Dragon Quest 1 is basically, imagine if all the fights were one-on-one. Because, like, basically it's a game where, like, you just level up. Basically, you get to level 26, and then you go kill the main boss of the game in a castle. Like, that's the entire arc of Dragon Quest 1. But it's simple enough that, like, it has had 32 years now of longevity. And I guess the other thing I would articulate on top of that is that Final Fantasy's longevity has come in no small part, because it was more popular over here than Dragon Quest, and it remains so.
Which is insane to me, but keep going, because I would love to hear this.
So Dragon Quest 1 was ported over here about 3 years after it came out, and it was basically handed out with the Nintendo Power Program. And all 4 of the Famicom games were eventually ported over here to the NES. And none of them sold nearly as well as the first Final Fantasy game. And I think you could probably come up with a lot of theory craft as to why that is. But part of that probably comes down to, I think Final Fantasy 1 does fiddle with more of like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of Western fantasy trope land. I think Yoshitaka Amano's art holds up. I think Nobuo Uematsu's music holds up very well. I couldn't tell you why it landed as well as it did here. And it came out like 2.5 years after it came out in Japan too. Like, it was a May 1990 game, which in Japan at that time, I think Dragon Quest IV was coming out. And like every Dragon Quest game mopped the floor with all 3 of the first Final Fantasy games. Like, it wasn't even really a contest. But over here, that just wasn't the case. So whatever money Square was making on Final Fantasy in Japan, which wasn't like insignificant, Final Fantasy 1 and 2 in the West did very well for them. So I think we can kind of blame ourselves for the longevity of the series. And I think it helps that we were basically missed 2 and 3. Like, we got 4 as 2, we got 3 as 6, that whole thing.
Yeah, so if it was so popular in the West, then why did Square screw the pooch in terms of porting the future entries until 6?
Because Final Fantasy 1 came out here in May of 1990, which the Super Nintendo came out later in 1990 in Japan. So by the time Final Fantasy 2 would have been localized enough to be ported, it was a perfectly good time for them to get Final Fantasy IV localized, ported over to the new Super Nintendo in late 91 or early 92, whenever that happened. So basically, by the time we would have gotten Final Fantasy II, we got Final Fantasy II. They just gave us Final Fantasy IV as 2. And it turns out we're better off for it, because it's like 1,000 times the game. Like, 1,000 times the game. Yeah.
They skipped the bad ones, and then 5 is not bad, but 5 is just
weird.
Like 6.
Yeah.
5's a weird game. 5 is experimental in a way that the other ones aren't. And compared to 6, which 5 has a lot of interesting systems, 6 is a story tour de force.
Yes.
Along with those interesting systems. So I think that it was really, they lucked out to a certain extent with how their localization worked.
Yeah.
I just look at this game and I Final Fantasy 1 and I see why I avoided JRPGs for such a long portion of my life, because I'm glad you guys were in an environment where it's like you were playing JRPGs and you felt inspired at one point in your life to revisit some of the older games. But I look at the games that came around this time and like the franchises I was invested in, and I can pretty much see why I was not interested. I was more into the computer role-playing games because just as a thought experiment, I looked at when this game released in Japan, what was available to computer role-playing gamers. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of amazed at like, wow, these were the games that came before Final Fantasy 1. And these were the games that people were already had the ability to play. So in 1982, Wizardry 1 came out.
Yeah.
So the framework for these character classes was already ironed out in 1982. Now, admittedly, Wizardry 1 is a very basic game. The same can be said about Ultima 1, Akilabeth. But for me, like, Ultima doesn't really start until Ultima 3, Exodus, which has a very extensive story and lore system.
Right, kind of gets into his, like, philosophical leanings.
Yeah, the Richard Garrick's philosophical, it's like you are the avatar, but you're a part of this religious movement, and the people don't really want your religious movement. So are you actually the good guy in the game? That was 1983. So we already have an interesting mechanical game with some semblance of a story. Then 1985, we have Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar, which I think has a really great story. I just hate playing it. I hate playing Ultima 4. I just hate it. It's such a... Oh, man. I really want to love that game, but man, it's such a pain to play. But it's actually probably one of the best stories that Richard Garriott's ever made. I know a lot of people like Ultima 5, but Ultima 4, you find out that all of the evil demons that you killed in Ultima 3 now are refugees being bullied by the other demons from the demon dimension, and they request asylum. They request asylum in the human dimension. They beg you, please don't kill us. You killed our leader, and he was the only thing that protected us from... Like, the only reason why we came to the human dimension is that we're actually being bullied in the demon dimension. That was the only reason why we came here. And so you actually start to question whether or not you're actually the good guy. It's like all this metacognition is being ignited as I'm playing this game in 1985.
Yeah.
Well, I would say play more of Final Fantasy 1 because...
Yeah, I know, crazy bonker town. It's a Final Fantasy game because Japan and whatever. But if we really want to get into like the first computer role-playing game that I feel is not, it's still rough around the edges, but mechanically it's interesting, Might and Magic. That was 1986. And that's the first computer role-playing game, despite its age, I feel like you can get through and still have to deal with some jank, but not hate yourself while doing it. And that's 1985. Might and Magic.
That's a good thing to have cited. I really missed out not mentioning that earlier. But yeah, Might and Magic.
Might and Magic is also like party management in a way that was far more in depth than it ever gets credit for. And then by the time around Might and Magic 3 comes around, like, mwah, that franchise had perfected. It had even a better party management system than I would say even Dragon Quest.
Yeah, I mean, even like 4 and 5 are. To the, like, if I had to point at like what are some good like 80s PC RPGs I would play, I would probably point to Ultima 4 or like Might and Magic 4 and 5 kind of put together, which they're kind of part of the same arc.
They're basically the same arc, which is good. I just wish that Ultima 4, like putting the items on the pentagram thing, was not a colossal piece of shit.
Yeah.
Dungeon Master was 1987. Oh my god, that fucking thing in Ultima 4. Dungeon Master was 1987, which is the doyen of the dungeon crawler first-person game.
Yeah.
Which, even though it's more of a Dragon Quest style thing, like the first-person perspective, navigating the dungeon, Dungeon Master is the dungeon game. It's the reason why every role-playing game has to have a dungeon. Okay, and I would say that the Dungeon Master is still fun to play. Again, jank, but you accept that. And then Wizardry 3, which is the Wizardry game other than Wizardry 4, but that's like in the 90s. And that was also 87. And then Pull of Radiance, which I say would be the first computer role-playing game that you can play without really feeling like you're banging your head on the walls with its mechanics. That's 88, which is 1 year after the fact. And so I just look at these games that came out and like what Final Fantasy 1 is drawing inspiration from. And I just feel like, look, if you're going to copy and paste and you're going to plagiarize some of your sources, which I also agree that these character designs are very interesting, but there were times where it's like, oh, that's the gelatinous cube from D&D. Oh, that's the tentacle monster. What is it? It's a wyvern or whatever it is, like the tentacle monster that kind of looks like the Star Wars people.
Oh, there's a mind flayer.
Yeah.
There's
times where it's like I feel like I'm
Pisca
playing.
Demons.
I feel like I'm playing the guess the D&D character game when I see the characters. Yes. And
very much so.
All of these games that it's drawing inspiration from, whether it be Pull of Radiance or Ultima or Wizardry, like they have all the ambition in the world, which I greatly appreciate. I greatly appreciate the amount of ambition and drive that Square Enix has. And good on them from literally learning from every Final Fantasy game they made. Every game taught them a lesson.
Did it?
Okay. Every game with the Sakaguchi era of Final Fantasy games taught them a lesson.
Okay, that's fair. So
I wonder why they didn't draw enough inspiration from these games, not realizing that there needs to be more to these mechanics rather than these very, very static character classes, and that the attempts at story are this general with no lore from examining equipment.
That's not. You should keep playing the game. If we were making judgments about, one, you did make judgments about other Final Fantasy games this far in, but two, we usually come around to saying, okay, there's more here than this. Though I will say this has probably the worst opening of any Final Fantasy game.
It's bad.
It's literally fetch quests that you don't even know what's going on. It's the most generic fantasy. None of the stuff that has given this series charm and longevity is readily apparent by the first few hours of Final Fantasy 1.
Minus music and art.
Yeah, minus music and art, and minus some of the specific character classes and how they play.
Yeah.
But once you get to the open world and start dealing with the crystals and start getting some of the larger story and, get airships and stuff like that.
We're collecting crystals!
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you know this about the Final Fantasy series. They like crystals. There's 4 elements, earth, fire, water, and wind.
They even wrote some chronicles about them, I heard.
Yeah, there's Chronicles Volume 1 and 2.
Hey, when are we going to get together and play Crystal Chronicles, by the way?
I did that for the Community Endurance Run 2 years ago.
Oh, shit, son.
We played 4-player. We speed ran. Got to the final boss. Fuck yeah, we did.
I will fly the fuck out to where it is you live and do that if invited.
Sure. I mean, we played 4-player. We got to the final boss, and it turned out the only person who practiced for the speed run was me, which made it hard to finish the game because I was the only person who was capable of not dying to the final boss immediately. We ended up failing because the final boss of that game is a fucker and much more difficult than all the things that came before.
Well, that's good.
A great Final Fantasy tradition indeed.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something specific that I would like to gripe about with this game is its status effects.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let me tell you how fucked that
Poison is a real fucker.
Poison sucks.
Poison's a fucker.
Paralyze is worse.
Paralyze is the worst status effect I've ever seen in a game.
Yep.
So
it's just
poison
like, hey,
is
did
annoying.
You like playing? Well, now you can't.
Yeah, now you can't. So poison, when you get poisoned, you take damage at the end of every turn cycle, like normal. But also in the world map, every time you take a step, you take damage like it's Pokemon. But it's way faster than in Pokemon. It's not like a few steps you get. It's every step you take damage. So you need to heal that immediately. But the real problem is paralyzed because usually mobs of enemies can range in number from like 1 to 6. And usually they don't actually mix the character classes that you're fighting against all that well. You'll usually fight against, 3 wolves or 6 wolves.
Yeah.
But some enemies like ghouls,
floating eyeballs in the water levels.
Yeah,
yep.
Or floating eyeballs, they will paralyze your characters. And the worst ones of these will just paralyze as a passive bonus to their regular attack.
That's the ghouls.
And so the ghouls, if they hit you and manage to paralyze your whole party, they will just keep attacking you till you're dead.
Yeah.
And if they keep attacking the same person, they will reapply the paralyzed status effect.
Yeah.
So as they eliminate characters, the chances of your character ever regaining the ability to act goes down and down and down and down until you're guaranteed to die.
Yeah. And the thing about those big mobs is, like, at the outset, so, like, the first spell that you should buy for your Black Mage in every one of these games is Sleep, because it's the first, and for a while it's the only crowd control tool that you have, because it's the only spell that you have that hits multiple people. I guess Dia does too for the White Mage, but assuming you're not fighting undeads a lot.
Fire 2.
Yeah, once you get into Fire 2s, once you get into, like, the third tier magic spells, this changes. But at the outset, when you're fighting, like, mobs of 9 goblins and you have, like, 12 health for everybody, your only real means to beat every one of those is to, like, hit every one of them until they're dead, or put them to sleep and then do it. So crowd control is a real problem, especially when you're playing with 3 characters. And
oh wow,
yeah, when you add the crowd control issue prior to getting, like, good crowd control spells plus this paralyzed thing, it turns into, like, the opposite of fun. It's just terrible.
Yeah, paralyzed might be. There's no defending against it either, and there's no items that cure it. You just have to put up with it.
Yeah.
And it's not like the turn cycles, you get to put in, in Pokemon when you're paralyzed, you can put in inputs, and then sometimes they'll happen, sometimes they won't.
Yeah.
In this game, it just skips your chance to input any commands unless you have a character who's controllable.
Yeah.
Which means for entire turn cycles, you won't even know that there was a turn cycle. You just keep getting attacked.
Yeah, it's rotten. It's rotten.
I don't know. ZP, did you deal with this?
Yes, Paralyze is bad. Paralyze is real bad. Poison... I don't understand why certain status effects carry over when the battle is over and other status effects don't. Like, thank goodness Paralyze doesn't carry over once the battle is over, because I don't know what I would do with myself.
I mean, there's kind of a grade 2 version of Paralyze where they just turn you to stone. And
that does.
Yeah, and the deal is there's an item that deals with that. So it's basically, if they could think of some, like, counter to the status effect, then it will last after a battle. Otherwise, it does not.
But, like, this just highlights something that I found very frustrating, is that it is turn-based, but the order or the attributes of, like, speeding up that, like, the very first part, like, the first couple of hours of this game were rough because I felt like it was slow. Like, this game was real slow.
Yeah,
and especially with magic casters, I felt like you are not where you need to be right now. You might be there in the next hour or so, but right now you are just a little sponge that I need to protect while the monk and the warrior get the job done. Just sit in the corner and play a Rubik's Cube or something.
Yep. Yeah.
And I felt like I was babysitting my Dark Mage for ages.
I guess the other thing that's worth pointing out, too, is I think one of the version differences between easy and normal mode, which is the difference between your version and ours, is the spells cost twice as much. So you're paying 50% discount on every spell you buy in your game, ZombiePie.
Baller.
So enjoy that, too.
I would say even then,
yeah,
if I did not find the Peninsula of Power, or I didn't find a few exploits here and there, the magic system isn't great. Like, 3 slots is not enough for each level. And I felt like I had to constantly, it's like, oh, great, well, I'm going to be facing a bunch of ice monsters. Where's the ice spells? Oh, it's all the way over into the fucking Elf Kingdom, and I have to go all the way back to buy the Blizzara spell over there and Null Frost.
So, question, ZP.
I have to go all the way over there to buy that spell?
Are you... In the PS1 version, are you limited to only having 3 spells of a given level?
Yes.
Okay, that's the same.
And so I never felt like I had a suite of spells that I could carry over to each environment if the environment became distinct from the previous ones. I felt like I would have identified, oh, hey, there's a bunch of ghouls here. I didn't buy any of the anti-undead magic. So, I guess I got to go all the way back, pick those up, and then come back to the location. And then,
luckily,
like, navigating the environment means I have to go through all of the random encounters, which... Have we talked about how the random encounters in this game are too many and they're worse?
Yeah, the rate is high.
Oh, my
the
God.
Rate is really high.
Classical,
oh, my God.
Let's say.
And when I got to level 20... And I felt comfortable of just like hitting the input button and just hitting people with physical attacks over and over again. It's like, fuck. It's like, yes, these goblins are not going to kill me. But the process of killing 6 goblins, it's wasted time. It's time for my finite existence on this planet that I will never get back.
Yeah, and you get to a point where you should just be running from the real trash mobs and just fighting, in my case, just beating the shit out of every ogre you see. Like you can do some like post-it note math and be like, the only worthwhile fights I'm getting into are basically against ogres and like things above ogres. Like every wolf I see, every goblin I see, I just walk past. And they can punch me in the back of the head, but it's going to do 2 damage. Who cares? I'm gone.
Yeah, fleeing is not an instantaneous thing, which I have a problem with. Because it's like, yes, I want to walk away. Game, no, I'm serious. I would like to walk away. Please, game, stop this. Great. I took 15 bits of damage.
As alluded to earlier, that's the one real use for the thief, because they've got, I think it's the evade stat is naturally high enough, or it's luck. Luck is the one. Luck is what biases your flee roll, and thieves to start with a preternaturally high luck.
So what explains what all these attributes do? Was that the manual? Is that the thing that me as a pirate I am being punished for having done?
Not necessarily. So most of this game just runs down to like tables and some like fairly basic like math formula, and then like the classes kind of have some special spins on each one of those. But so let's see. So strength is strength of attacks. Accuracy is determines how many hits that you're going to get after a certain point. I think it moves in steps of 8, if I'm not mistaken. Endurance. So defense is like your static defense, which can be biased by the armor you're wearing, or in the case of a monk, by their level. Let's see. Endurance is kind of a learned skill of your ability to take damage by, like, let's say, ducking and rolling or whatever. I'm trying to remember the rest of them off the top of my head. But, like, most of them work on what would amount to is, like, fairly basic algebra formulas that when you look at them, it's just like, this whole game is just math the game, which I guess is the entire genre.
Sure.
In a lot of ways is, like, fairly determined. That's why I said like Dragon Quest 1 is a game where you get to level 26 and then you beat the game, because at that point the math just works out that all things being equal, you'll just win the final boss fight.
Okay, Gino.
Yes,
I want to impress you.
Okay.
Water, lightning, fire, ice.
You did it.
Okay, so this actually leads me to another...
Final Fantasy X, if that ever comes up again, you know.
Water, lightning. Well, the only reason why I got confused is that in Mobius, it's lightning, ice. It's fire, ice, lightning, water. Or it's actually...
That's the Final Fantasy X.
No. It's earth, wind, fire, water. In Mobius Final Fantasy. So anyways, my big problem about another element of this game is the elemental system. And there is that rock, paper, scissors element. It is not clear which enemies are which element unless it's like, oh, it's a floating fish. I bet that's water. But it's like, oh, that's a werewolf? Is that undead? Is a werewolf undead? I guess I'll try this spell. Nope, it's not. I guess I have to try a different spell. Is an ogre earth or normal type or rock? Yeah. And I guess like mummies are undead, even though they hit like normal enemies, and they were no joke. It's like, so like there were times when I was like looking at an enemy like cross-eyed and like squinty, and I was like, is that a fire enemy or a water enemy or earth or undead?
You know what the nice thing is? When you put a sword in their belly, it doesn't matter what they are.
Yeah. There's an unreasonable
They're all goo on the inside.
There's an unreasonable expectation that you are spending time looking through the bestiary when you're playing this game.
But also, then what about how am I supposed to deal with enemies that have high resistance to physical attacks and the game demands that I use magic, such as like the globs, like the green slimes or the gelatinous cubes?
You cast Sword on your highest attacker until their attack is so high that it doesn't matter what the enemy's defense is anymore.
Yeah, that effect actually stacks.
Yeah, it
I don't
stacks,
have sword.
and then
What
you
is
just
sword?
Or steel.
It's steel.
I don't have steel.
It's a spell you can get, I think, at the second town, the pirate town. And once you buy it for your black mage, you just target your highest damage character, and you just keep stacking it on them because the math equations for how damage is dealt in this game are such that being like a few points above an enemy's defense results in wildly more damage.
Yeah,
I don't have that ability. I have to go get it, but I'm not looking forward to going from the War of Mines to the pirate town.
I guess the one thing I would encourage you to do is when you get to a place where you see like, oh, they have a new level of spells that I don't have, is hang out there and get enough gold until you can fill out that section of your spell book, no matter how long it takes, because you're going to need all those spells. And maybe root around down the line because there's some pretty good list of like, basically you've got 4 options and you can only pick 3 for every tier of them. But there's a couple that you can really just happily walk past and never need. So, take the price of spells, multiply it by 3. You have 2 magic casters, multiply that by 2 and be like, the expectation is I need to accumulate this much money and buy all of these spells because you're gonna need them. Like
But what if you just play the sliding block puzzle and then get money that way?
So, I didn't tell you how to get the money.
Fine.
I just told you to
so
get
if I buy the spells, I can only have 3 of any level. So what do I do with the extra spells that I'm not buying?
So
do I just let them sit in the store?
Yep.
Okay.
And you'll be able to.
So what happens when I discard a spell? Because I've been so afraid of discarding spells.
So if you discard a spell, that opens up a slot where if you find that, wow, I really shouldn't have bought, Blindna, which is don't buy Blindna.
I bought Silence.
That's the better buy. Don't buy Blindna. Silence is the one you want.
I think I have Sleep as well.
Sleep is good.
Why the fuck is Haste a goddamn black magic spell? That should be white magic. What the fuck?
Yep, they didn't really figure out the time mage split between like status effects necessarily between the two parties in 1987 is really how the magic system is explained.
I have Haste, and Haste is great. Casting Haste on my monk.
Haste
Holy
might
shit,
be the most
he hits
important.
hard.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah, I just looked up what the rewards are for you doing the sliding block puzzles, EP, in the GBA version, and it's like a mega elixir and some other healing item.
Oh, they took out the guild bonuses.
Yeah, so
that's
I'm just gonna go to the Peninsula Power. I don't mind.
Yeah, just get as much money as you can and just fill out that spell book.
I think I have like $6,000 at this point.
That's gonna be pretty good, I think. Yeah, you're at like level 4 spells at this point, so.
Yeah, I'm level 21.
Yeah, you'd be able to buy level 5, 6 stuff too.
Level 21.
Anyway,
I think we've covered most of the beginning of Final Fantasy 1. The only thing I want to just say is, as someone who's kind of keeping track of Final Fantasy 9 references in Final Fantasy 1, the references so far are Garland. He's in Final Fantasy 9, and he's in Mobius as well. He's carried forward. There, Metoya and Metoya's music, I think you can hear in FF9. Rally Ho, the dwarves, that is preserved in FF9. And I think those are the big things.
Yo, dude, the black mages are actual people. They're not like weird black-faced people. They're like actually humans. That blew my mind. He takes off his hat and it's like a person in there. What?
Yep.
Why?
I don't like that.
It scared me. He took his hat off and it was like a person's face.
Yep.
What?
I know. But those are the references so far. There will be more because this game, I know that there are elements that more directly are reused. But yeah, we'll keep playing it.
Yep.
We will. So till next time, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you
for joining us. Thank you, ZP.
I'm always going to be here because you're forcing me to do these things. And maybe one of these days I will force you to play another adventure game or visual novel that haunts your dreams.
I have a wonderful list of stuff I could coerce you guys to play, but I'm going to save that for later appearances.
That's fair. All right. Thank you, listeners. Remember, if you want to reach out to the show, send us a message at DeepListensPod or at ThatPinguino on Twitter. You can send us an email at deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com or hit up our comment sections at deeplistens.libsyn.com. So, till next time, thank you, everybody. Peace!